Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Melissa Siegel. I'm a professor of migration studies, and this is a channel about all things migration. And today we're going to continue with a migration country case study, where this is part of a larger series, a migration country case study series. So if you're interested in looking at other countries and other series, please check out my link up above. I'll also link them in the description below. But today we are going to talk specifically about Azerbaijan. And Azerbaijan is located in the South Caucasus region of Eurasia. It's on the coast of the Caspian Sea, and it's a country that borders Russia, Georgia, Armenia, Turkey, and Iran. And the historical lands of Azerbaijan are some of the most ancient cultural sites in the world and of modern civilization. So today we're covering Azerbaijan. In this video, we are going to look at the history of migration in Azerbaijan, but please do look at our other videos, specifically looking at the migration policy and governance in Azerbaijan today, and also the current migration situation. But let's jump right in and get started at looking at the history of migration in the country. Now, as I just said, Azerbaijan has a very interesting, rich cultural background. We are not going to go into all of that. That would be impossible and really outside of the scope of the video of today. But I do think it's important to understand a kind of general timeline of what has gone on in Azerbaijan. And of course, there were many different population movements and these different periods. So you had the early states of Mana and Albania and Atropatenia. You had the then occupation by the Persians in the 3rd century, then the occupation by the Arab Caliphate in the 7th century. There was also the establishment of specific local states in the 9th and 10th centuries. You had a number of other periods where different states were also formed in this same region. You also had the Nafari states in between 1500 and the mid 1700s. Then you had the Nadir Shah's periods between 1736 and 1747. And then you also had the Khanidites and Sultanites period leading up to, let's say, the 19th centuries. But then you had the Russian-Persian Wars or Russo-Persian Wars in the early 1800s. And then we had the establishment of the Azerbaijani Democratic Republic. And I really want to start talking about the history of migration from this period in 1918. Then we'll look at the Second Republic under the Soviet Union, which was the Azerbaijani SSR. We'll look at the early independence period and then a little bit more of the modern period. If we look at the Azerbaijani Democratic Republic, Azerbaijan declared independence in May of 1918 when the Transcaucasian Semyon, which was part of the Russian Empire, was abolished. And at that time, then the states of Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia declared their independence. Before this, they were one kind of bloc altogether. This state was actually the first democratic parliamentary republic in the Muslim East. It adopted the national flag, an anthem, an emblem, and declared the mother tongue as a state language. And for the first time in the East, and long before many European countries, women were actually granted the right to vote in Azerbaijan. Now let's turn to the Second Republic period under the rule of the Soviet Union. So the previous period that I talked about starting in 1918 was actually very short-lived. 2 years later in 1920, Azerbaijan was occupied by Russia and became part of the Soviet Union until 1991. In 1922, it was united under the Transcaucasian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic, together again with Armenia and Georgia. There were also other important points, obviously. You had World War II. Then there was also the relocation of Armenians and forcing Azerbaijanis to leave their place of residence in the mid-1940s. And then In December of 1991, there was the end of the Soviet Union, which created a whole new period of migration during this time. But another thing that's actually important to look at is not only international migration, but also internal migration in Azerbaijan. And with this regard, urbanization has been quite important in Azerbaijan. Since the 1970s, as a result of the industrialization and the increase of state revenues due to new energy resources and oil that was found, the urban population has exceeded the rural population, and Azerbaijan has experienced population inflows to urban areas. Internal migration flows to the capital city of Baku have become more and more, or have increased more and more over the years, and in 2020, 2 million people out of a population of 10 million officially were registered in Baku city. So 1/5 of the population is actually located in the capital city of the country. Now let's look at the early independence period, really between 1991 and 1995. During this early post-independence years, the country witnessed significant emigration flows due to an economic slowdown, political instability, as well as a war in the Nagorno-Karabakh region with Armenia that first started with clashes in 1988, but the war itself really took off from 1991 to 1993. There was also a resulting occupation of 20% of the territories in Azerbaijan. The war triggered movements of several Azerbaijanis from Armenia and Armenians from Azerbaijan. During this war, we saw a movement of quite a lot of people. So Azerbaijan saw around 650,000 people internally displaced within Azerbaijan, and almost 200,000 people were forced to leave Armenia and were refugees then in Azerbaijan. It's important to note, though, that there were population movements between the two countries. So around 300,000 Armenians also left the territory of Azerbaijan. So you saw a lot of population movements during this period of the Nagorno-Karabakh war with Armenia at the time. So now if we look really at emigration stocks between 1990 and 2019, we can see some very interesting shifts over that time period. So in the early 1990s, the war, the economic slowdown, the political instability all triggered further emigration of people from the country during the early years of independence. Azerbaijan had higher rates of migration compared to many of the other post-Soviet countries. So the OECD actually reported that in 2000, the emigration rate of Azerbaijan actually was around 14.5% of the population, and this was higher compared to other post-Soviet countries such as Belarus or Kyrgyzstan or Moldova or Ukraine that all saw rates between 13% and 10%. But there were also other post-Soviet states that had higher rates of immigration at this time, like Kazakhstan, Armenia, and Georgia, that all had rates around 21% to 17% at this time. After the collapse, though, of the Soviet Union, a number of Azerbaijani immigrants moved to various different former Soviet republics, but particularly to Russia, to search for better living conditions. And the communities that also established themselves during this time helped to increase labor migration networks of Azerbaijanis to the largest cities in Russia and triggered a larger emigration of Azerbaijani labor migrants to Russia later. According to UNDP, the immigrant stock of Azerbaijan around the world generally followed a downward pattern throughout the last 2 decades, with the only exceptions in 1995 and 2019. But as we see from the graph, the emigration rate was relatively higher until the 2000s, and then we've seen it start to decrease. There was an upward trend in 1995, which was mainly due to the economic slowdown and a tough situation in Azerbaijan after the occupation of its territories. We can see that there's been actually quite a tumultuous situation in Azerbaijan through its history. It's been invaded many different times. It's had different rulers also over the country and lots of different population movements from the early days. But if we look now more towards, let's say, the last 100+ years, most of the movements have been because of the Soviet period during the USSR period, and then also in the post-Soviet period, mainly because of conflict and also because of economic instability. So that's really what we've seen as being characterizing the Azerbaijani situation in its history. Now stay with us to turn to the current day migration situation, where we've really seen a change from Azerbaijan being a mainly migrant sending country to Azerbaijan being a mainly migrant receiving country in modern times now. Please also check out our video on the current policy situation and governance situation of migration in the country. And if you're interested, do stick around for our other country studies on this channel where we look at a number of other countries in greater detail with regard to their migration situation. If you found this video useful, please like, subscribe to this channel, hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of the videos that we upload every week. I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.